Hey, we're back. Welcome to a history of SAPs, Blackjacks, and Slungshots. Well, it's amazing it's taken me this long to get to this one here, because it's the first one that I ever wanted when I first got into this subject, and it is the D3 Protection Fatty SAP. Now, as we'll discuss in terms of functionality, it's not the most versatile SAP, it's not the most devastating SAP, but it's very evocative of the real old-timey ones, to me. I don't mean the classic 20th century police models, Buckheimer, Smith & Wesson, etc., which are the most avidly collected. I'm talking before that. Basically, if you think about any kind of vintage comic book, illustration, that kind of thing, the saps in those would be something like this. And that's because this is basically a leather teardrop sack filled with loose metal shot. For me, that's the classic configuration. And I keep saying sap for a reason, but just know that back in the day, people would have called that a blackjack as well. So let's take a look. One thing that's funny is when you get this, it's actually stiff as a board. It's leather, so it becomes more flexible over time. And I haven't even gotten this one to full flexibility yet, or like optimal flex. It's not all old-fashioned. This keychain here on the end is more of a modern touch, and it's a point of contention with this particular model. It's meant for your keys, right? It's a key ring, but a lot of people, myself included, kind of assumed it was for that. And I really like the, what we'll call a one-finger sap grip. See how far that lets the weapon stick out from my hand? That equals noticeably more impact, in my opinion, than a more standard grip like this, and keeps it from flying out of your hand. Interestingly enough, some katana schools teach you to hold the sword so that your pinky is not on the handle, kind of trailing off. Let's move on to another modern touch, the belt clip. Now, they did have these back in the day, but not back as in the 19th century, more like mid-20th century. Now, you do have to adjust your grip accordingly. You know, it's not sharp, I wouldn't say, but it's not perfectly smooth either because it's a clip. So you gain carrying convenience because of the belt clip, but you maybe lose a little bit in terms of handling or ease of handling. It's not a mandatory feature, by the way. It just happened to be on this model here that I got, on this exact specimen, I should say. So there's the classic SAP outline, right? That clamshell cross-section. That's, of course, where the load is, and it's interesting, I think, in a way, that's the real weapon, and the rest is just a container. Just one of the many quirks about these that, as you know, I think makes them very unique in all of weapons history. That load, by the way, is 9 ounces of lead shot, and as you know, probably, because it's loose shot, we would call it a soft load. And there are easier ways to go about making a blunt instrument than a, leather sandwich sack that contains loose filling, rolling around on the inside when in motion, which is another part of their unique nature and part of just what makes them cool. It takes a level of craftsmanship that it simply doesn't to, carve a short wooden truncheon. Because this modern throwback is so purposely simple, there's not that much more to say, so let's start playing with it. Now, recall that we talked about this old-fashioned configuration's lack of versatility. So you wouldn't use it to thrust. It wouldn't work very well for that at all. You can't strike with the butt end, right? This really is all about the classic sap strike, kind of the floppy strike. I mean, I guess you could use it as a fist load, maybe to jab with the head like this, so it doesn't have room to slide, but no. Really a single-minded design, and again, it's for that, right? The slapping tennis-like strike, forehand and backhand. Now, keep in mind, back to the belt clip, that if you're clipped on the outside, it would look like this. And it's kind of funny, people would still not realize it's a weapon, really. You can hear the shot rattling around when you do that, but just want to give you more of an up-close view on some of the parts. Now, there's the edge, and keep in mind, speaking of lack of versatility, edge on strike is not really an option here. I mean, you could do it, but it wouldn't be very effective. Speaking of effectiveness, here's my patented test, and notice I'm hitting multiple times and not reacting as I normally do, right? Like with a hard-loaded blackjack, etc. I can even tentatively, well, more than tentatively, hit the back of my hand and wrist, which I would absolutely not do with a blackjack, what we call a blackjack now. And that's because this design is not about maximizing damage. So, been playing around a little bit with sleight of hand type stuff, shown that before, so you can see how this one definitely works well for that. Pop. Ready to go. Like just about all of the weapons in this family, it's just fun to handle. I don't know why, they just are. How else could you use something like this? Well, like I talked about, it's pretty limited in that way, so reverse grip, you could, technically, that would be the swing, but not so much. Once again, this design is really all about one kind of swing. And speaking of that, first, look at the flexibility here, right? Okay, there it is. And now I'm going to move further down on the handle, and look at the greater range of motion. So, going back to what we said about the pinky before, I think it does make a difference. Now let's talk about some more uses. So Well, look how small it is, right? Once you look at it in perspective, again, kind of one of the hallmarks of these weapons. I've shown that combination before, but here's a real typical strike, right? That guy. He's going to hit me, so I'm going to block with my offhand and strike him with the other one. Nothing revelatory there. I call it the revolving door, and you can do it with any weapon, but here's what I'm trying to get across. If I had like a little short baton or something, I would just strike, maybe jab like that, but I would not need to time my flick of the wrist like I did there. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If I just do a simple smack, back to my classic test, and I got decent results. So let me try the same thing, but with more of a like a towel flick motion, and this has a lot of precedent in like old martial arts. Think of like a bullwhip. You have to swing it just right to maximize the impact. The goal is to sink as much energy into the target as you can within as short a period of time. You see that bounce back, and it noticeably hurts more. I mean, it absolutely does. If you want to take full advantage of the flexibility and the kind of momentum acceleration it provides, you've got to get the timing right. So anyway, put it all together, and the bottom line is that I think these have a lot of nuance to them as weapons, and that's why I think this should be really interesting to martial artists who are not used to using things like this, because they're so forgotten. And to be really clear, I don't mean use as in to knock people out with. I'm talking about just training. But of course they were used to put people to sleep with, way back when, and that's what this one here is well designed for. So if you recall, it didn't hurt too much on like the back of the hand and places like that. Well, it's because it's not designed for those things. This was kind of the world's original stun gun. And just like a modern taser wouldn't make for a very good melee weapon, these, the original, again, this is just evocative of them, the original floppy soft saps weren't necessarily all-around weapons. At least I don't think so. It was more about getting that KO, putting someone's lights out. With a well-placed shot, of course. And I'm not saying this kind couldn't be used in kind of all-around combat. It could be. You just have a higher degree of difficulty, if you will. But I would not say that about its descendants, essentially, like the flat sap and what I call the modern blackjack, the coil body with the hard load. Those, to me, are very versatile weapons. Maybe you would say more true weapons. So anyway, wow, the D3 Protection Fatty. Give us a chance to do a real refresher, an overview,